Okay, this is the second of two videos, devotionals. I'm intending to kind of piggyback off of this past Sunday. I want to start off with some quotes from a June 8th Washington Post article. There's been approximately 1,000 deaths by police each year for the past 5 years in America. Now, that's out of 330 million people, 1,000 deaths, which I don't think is a lot. That's just me. 45% of those were white, and white people were about 60% of America. 25% of the deaths were black. Blacks are about 13% of America. So overall, approximately 1,000 deaths a year. 250 were Black Americans. Now, an overwhelming majority of these deaths resulted from the individual possessing a weapon. Okay, only 6% of the deaths were of individuals who were unarmed. And so in 2019, here's the statistics. There was 55 unarmed people that were shot by police. 25 were white. Now, they don't really seem to matter. 14 were black. And in almost every case, we've got issues of criminal activity. We've got issues of resisting arrest and other factors that contribute to how things played out. Okay. At the same time, FBI statistics, you can look this up. There was 2,570 Black Americans shot by other Black Americans. So the statistics vary. Sometimes it's about 90% at the lowest. Sometimes it's like 96% at the highest. But by and large, of course, you've heard this, 95%, 90%, overall majority of deaths of Black Americans are by other blacks, not by whites. Only 14 in all of 2019 shot by police who were unarmed. But then there's other contributing factors as well. Now, on the previous video I just put out, I suggested 4 things that would eliminate the problem. Number 1, don't break the law. Number 2, don't get an attitude. Just be humble, be thankful, appreciative, understanding. Number 3, have the maturity to respect authority according to what the scriptures teach, and treat everyone with love. If you just showed love to everyone, even in the face of your enemies, you can change hearts. You can see hearts transformed. And number 4, don't dress like a criminal. Now, I'm going to read to you a passage in 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 11 through 23. And this is the devotional thought for today. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 11 through 23. Dear friends, I urge you as foreigners and exiles to abstain from sinful desires which wage war against your soul. Live such good lives among the pagans that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits you. In other words, don't break the law. Just live such morally good lives that even if enemies accuse you, they have nothing to stand on because you've done nothing wrong. You're blameless. This was the same issue with Daniel in the Old Testament. Daniel had a lot of enemies. He was favored by God. People accused him, but they couldn't find any issue with his life because he was a morally upright man. He followed in the ways of God. He treated everybody with respect, with love. He didn't break the law. He didn't accept bribes. They couldn't find anything on him. So this first passage, 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 11 and 12, don't break the law. Don't give in to sinful desires. Let your good deeds speak for themselves, even in the face of accusations from enemies. Verse 13, submit yourselves for the Lord's sake to every human authority, whether to the emperor as a supreme authority or to governors who are sent by him to punish those who do wrong and commend those who do right. For it is God's will that by doing good you should silence the ignorant talk of foolish people. So Jesus encourages us to respond differently than the way that Satan encourages us to respond. If we've been wronged, if we've been hurt, if we've been accused, if we've been charged, Satan encourages us to respond with retaliation, in pride, irritation, anger, revenge. Jesus doesn't follow that. He encourages us to respond the exact opposite. Just continue to keep doing good. Love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute. Do good to your enemies. Go above and beyond. That's what's ultimately going to change their heart. You retaliating, responding with violence in the face of a perception that somebody has been violent to you is going to just compound the problem. And verse 13 says, submit yourselves to the Lord's sake to every human authority whom God has ordained to punish lawlessness and protect and defend the weak. So here's another one. Don't break the law. Number 1, don't give in to sinful desires. Number 3, have the maturity to respect authority and treat everyone with love. This is verse 13. Verse 17. I should say this. Verse 16, live as free people, but do not use your freedom as a cover-up for evil. In other words, don't take advantage of the freedom you have. My 4th point was don't dress like a criminal. Like, just use wisdom. Don't use the freedom we have as a cover-up for evil. Don't push the line. Stay far away from the line. Then you won't be accused. You're not going to put yourself in compromising situations. Verse 17 says, show proper respect to everyone. Again, goes back to submission, submit to human authority, submit to law enforcement, show proper respect for law enforcement. Verse 18, slaves in reverent fear of God, submit yourself to your masters, not only to those who are good and considerate, but those who are harsh. So, again, God's getting on Christians. Here we have it in Scripture. Don't just respond to others the way they are treating you. No, he says, I want you to maintain your consistency the entire time. Whether they're good and considerate to you or whether they are harsh to you, I want you to submit in fear of me. For it is commendable if someone bears up under the pain of unjust suffering. That sounds familiar. Because they are conscious of God. God says it's commendable, like it's going to be rewarded. But how is it to your credit if you receive a beating for doing wrong and endure it? He says if you break the law, and this is the consequences of you breaking the law. So in almost an overwhelming 99.9% of these circumstances, we've got violations of multiple God-given laws and God-given principles. It says, don't break the law. But if you suffer for doing good and you endure it, this is commendable before God. To this you were called because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow in his steps. He committed no sin and no deceit was found in his mouth. When they hurled their insults at him, he did not retaliate. When he suffered, he made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to him who judges justly. So the second point, don't get an attitude, take a humble approach. This is seen in the attitude of Christ, the example that Jesus set. We should follow in his steps. This is the second point that I made. Don't get an number 1, don't break the law. Secondly, don't get an attitude. Be thankful, appreciative, understanding. Don't retaliate. Don't threaten in return. Entrust yourself to God who judges justly. God's the ultimate judge. He will see everything is sorted out. Follow in the example of Christ. So Christians truly are called to a completely different standard than the way the world operates. They are called to the way that Christ operates. Follow in his footsteps. And I see in the previous video that I made the 4 suggestions that I said would eliminate 99% of the problem. I see that backed up by Scripture. And this is proof just from this one passage in 1 Peter chapter 2, 11 through 23. So, wanted to give you some Scripture to meditate on, to think about. It's very simple. God knows what's best. If we would just obey God, follow Scripture, we'd eliminate 99.9% of the problem. Now, we can never eliminate Satan, at least not in this era. He's always going to be after us. He's going to charge us, Christians, millions. We're not talking about, what are the statistics? 14 black, unarmed, killed in 2019. And we had issues even regarding those 14 and the 25 white, where they're involved in criminal activity, resisting. We're talking about thousands, tens of thousands of millions of Christians and Jews have been killed, martyred, persecuted for who they are. But Satan's not interested in justice for them. We're not interested in hundreds of thousands of abortions. We're not interested in those kind of injustices in America. Satan's not going to do anything that's going to undermine his own attempts to destroy the foundation of this government and all that America has done for the advancement of the gospel. He's interested in advancing his cause, causing division, and just undermining from within. So, wanted to share this with you today. 1 Peter chapter 2, the principles involved, and of course the recommendations, just based on good worldly wisdom and biblical principles in the last video. So hopefully this helps you process through more of what's going on as a country.